Thank you all for joining us tonight for our last installment of our application training camp, where we are diving into your supplemental essays. I know that there have been lots of questions in previous weeks about the supplemental essays. Well, now we are here, and we will learn from the best. So, that poll, we have quite a few parents, students, counselors, some others joining us tonight. So, thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know that there are other things you could be doing with your time, so thanks for joining us. Just some quick housekeeping. If you have any comments or replies to questions that we may or may not ask, you can put them in the chat box. Also, please don't use the raised hand feature. We won't be utilizing that tonight. If you have any questions, be sure to put them in the Q&A, and that way we won't lose them in the course of the webinar. If you have the latest version of Zoom, you could turn on your closed captions and translations. We will also send out this recording, so keep your eyes peeled on your email. And if you don't find it in your email, it will be on our website. So it'll be up there for about a week or so, or you can email me directly and I will send you the recording. Introductions, and I will let our wonderful expert introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Beddingfield. I'm one of the senior graduate coaches at Ingenious Prep. Been with them for many years, worked with a lot of different students. My specialty tends to be writing. As you can see from my background, English, classics, kind of humanities direction is kind of what I've always done. But I've always also loved working with students on their writing and taught writing at several different levels. So working on the writing aspects of the applications and helping students kind of explore themselves and represent themselves in my writing or in their writing is always one of my kind of features and highlights of every application season. So I will be talking about that with you today with the supplements. But there you go. If you have any more questions about who I am, you can always ask Dorothy. But yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. I am Dorothy Manforti, as most of you already know, the Marketing and Special Projects Manager here at Ingenious. And most of you already know the drill, but for our newcomers, we will dive into what makes Ingenious a little bit different, and that would be our roadmap of success. So, first up on that roadmap is our counselors. So, we have over 150 former admissions officers from top schools all across the country. So, they come from schools like Harvard, Yale, Duke, Princeton, just to name a few. And our former admissions officers work on a two-on-one team with our graduate coaches like Shannon, who are graduates from these top universities. They know what it takes to become students there because they've done it. They've lived it, they know how to do it because they did. Then the next stop on that roadmap is our resources. So we give our students access to a plethora of resources, including, you'll see at the bottom of this list, academic and reflective writing seminars. We know that writing is a very crucial part of your application, so we take a look at the whole picture and want to polish you up in every aspect that we can. Another stop on our resources tour, so our academic mentorships, where students can conduct individualized mentorships in an area of their interest. So you've heard these examples before, but we've had courses in the statistics of basketball, is it legal, neuroscience and music, some AI courses. We have some courses with professors from Embry-Riddle University in Arizona, so a variety of courses for a variety of interests. Now our curriculum, our next stop. So we build our curriculum using objective insights from our former admissions officers. So we have picked their brain and we have gotten all of their insider trade secrets and we've put them together to create our systematic and operational curriculum. And we use those trade secrets to train and maintain our counseling team. So even if you are really shooting for Caltech and you have a counselor from MIT and maybe a graduate coach from Yale, as an example, your counselors have that inside network where they have the insider information from Caltech, if that is, whatever school in that scenario, where you can still get all of that insider secrets and all of the information from behind the curtain at Caltech. Our results. So, this past year, our students received 160 Ivy League plus top 10 offers, over 500 top 30 offers, and over 1,400 top 100 offers. So, overall, last year was a great year for us, and we are on the train, chugging towards another great year. And now that you know a little bit more about us, we will dive in.
All right, so I'm going to take over. I'm going to start today with a very brief Common App review, kind of looking at the place of the supplemental writings in the overall application. Then I'm going to talk more extensively, most extensively actually, about the why school and why program essays, which are some of the most popular types of writing that you'll see in the supplements. And then we'll also look at other types of sample supplements and think about strategies on how to answer those. All right, so the common application and in particular, the personal statement. This tends to be the most daunting writing task for most students regarding their applications. It's the one that you hear about the most. It's certainly the one that is most often featured in application or admissions movies or high school stress movies or whatever. It tends to be the thing. However, it is only one piece in your applications, and for any individual school, the supplements themselves are actually probably more important. Your Common App personal statement is only important in the sense that it goes to nearly all of your schools. So your essays, and this includes your personal statement, but also your writing supplements, are complements to the rest of your application. So the writing is the piece of the application that you have some of the most control over at the time you're doing the application. But it is only a piece, and it's really important to consider that within the context of your overall application. They need to provide new insight on you both as a person, if you're the applicant, and as a prospective student, or a new perspective on the details of your life represented elsewhere in your application. So it needs to show something different. Don't simply repeat yourself. So, for example, your personal statement is not the opportunity to rehash your activities list in paragraph form, right? Instead, you want to use your writing strategically to provide context, personal meaning, and a concrete vision of who you are. Who are you as an applicant? Um, Unlike most school specific supplements, that is, the questions that schools individually ask you to fill out, the prompts for the Common App personal essay don't actually matter. I never have my own students even look at them before they start writing. They are only helpful in as much as they provide some potential brainstorming options. They do not matter. Instead, the instructions do, because these define the objectives of the personal statement and kind of its job, for lack of a better word, in the application. So this is a quick kind of snapshot of the instructions, not the prompts. So the personal statement demonstrates your ability to write clearly and concisely on a selected topic and helps distinguish yourself in your own voice. Fundamentally, that is the job of the personal statement. Distinguish yourself in your own voice. What do you want the readers of your application to know about you, apart from courses, grades, and test scores? Those are going to be well represented in other parts of your application. They're not for here. So choose the option that best helps you answer that question and write an essay no more than 650 words that gets you your length, using a prompt to inspire your response. So the prompts just inspire a response. And there is always at the end the option to have a totally different essay that doesn't even answer any of them. So basically, with your personal statement, you need to decide for yourself, what do I need the admissions office to understand about me in order to make the best sense of the rest of the application and who I am? Tell that story, provide that information, and it doesn't matter what the prompt is and what prompt you select. You will, although, there are definitely some successful personal statements that aren't 650 words. Successful ones lean much closer to 650 words than they do to 250. So expect a personal statement of at least 500 or 550 words. All right. On the other hand, right? So what differentiates supplemental essays from the personal statement, which again, it goes to every school, it goes to every school equally. It is entirely, and it's designed entirely to be about the student and kind of what they think they need to vocalize or represent in their application. Supplements, those essays kind of range from personal writing, much like the personal statement, to very academic or analytical writing. It depends on the question that you're being asked. Unlike the personal statement, you don't always need to tell a story that shows your personality. While it is typical or common to feature a much shorter story or to highlight aspects of your personality in some of these shorter supplements, it is not required, and you need to tailor that to the specific question that you're being asked. Instead, you should focus on providing the information that they are looking for. So if they ask you a question about leadership, they are interested in finding out about your leadership and they want evidence of it and they want concrete details. If they ask you about why you want to come to this school, you need to provide those details. So answer the question very directly and provide that information very clearly. So while the prompts don't matter for the personal statement, they matter very much for the supplemental essays and the other supplemental questions. They can also vary very widely in their length. So some supplementals have prompts where they only give you 35 words or 200 characters. These are much, much shorter. So you also need to do a little bit of strategizing about what you can accomplish in the length of the essay. If it's 35 words, it is a short answer, right? What can you say? Can you communicate yourself? Some are also quite long. So longer supplements, some are as long as, 250, 300 is a standard length supplement. Some are as long as like 400, 500, even some that are 650 themselves. But longer supplements might ask you to do something like expand on an activity or why you've chosen a particular school. And those longer supplements really do allow your personality to shine, but in a way that's kind of more specific to the question and the school itself. All right. So now that you've kind of got the overview of the supplements, I want to focus in particular on why school and why program essays. These are, in my experience over the past like many years, some of the most ubiquitous questions for college applications. At least a majority of schools have some version of at least one of them. And so it becomes very important that you understand how to answer these and what is important about these questions and how schools are reading them. All right, so the why school and why major program essays. The most important thing here, content matters, right? You need, no matter how polished or beautiful the prose is, if you do not have specific, concrete content, both about yourself and about the school and its resources, it will not be successful. You need to prioritize clarity and precision when you're explaining your interest and background and your intended major, as well as detailed knowledge of the school and its programs, right? So again, clarity, precision, detailed knowledge. So I want to show you some examples. These first ones are some examples of what a why major looks like. So why major essays are they ask the question in different ways, and I'm gonna show you a few examples of that. But usually it kind of comes down to why do you want to study? Like, what is the thing you want to study? Why do you want to study it? And usually, like, kind of what is your background? Like, how have you come to that particular field of study? Right. So an example, this is from the University of Illinois. They actually give you a very specific and concrete instructions on how to answer this. So explain in detail an experience you've had in the last 3 to 4 years, so high school, related to your first choice major. So you have indicated somewhere else in the application, what is your first choice major? They are asking you, what is an experience that relates to that? It can be from an extracurricular activity, a class you've taken, or something else. They don't care where it comes from, but it needs to relate to the experience, needs to relate to your major, right? They give you 150 words. So basically, this is a what is your background and how does it lead you to this? And again, this is a little bit up to the student and their connections between fields to make that connection. They also have describe your personal and or career goals after graduating from UIUC and how your selected first choice major will help you achieve them. So it's kind of divided this question up. What is your background? Tell us one of these experiences. And how does it relate to your goals in the future? Which means you have to articulate your goals in the future, right? So if your goal is, if you are in, uh, you know, civil engineering and you want to work on the kind of more of an environmental kind of questions in water purification. Okay. What is your career goal? You have to state it clearly. This is the job I want to do. And this major in civil engineering at UIUC will help me achieve it in what way? Right? How will I do that? So again, they kind of divide this question up. Another example of a kind of why major is from something like Columbia. What attracts you to your preferred areas of study at Columbia College or Columbia Engineering? Again, they only give you 150 words. Columbia's supplements keep getting shorter, and they're harder because of it. So again, it's like, why do you want to study this? Like, why you've indicated your area of study. What attracts you to it? Why do you want to do that? The Texas question, why are you interested in the major you indicated as your first choice major, which is about the most straightforward it can be, right? Why do you want to do this? They give you a little bit more. They give you 250 to 300 words to answer that question. So if you're confronted with this why major essay, I usually suggest students that start with an idea or a problem that you find most compelling within your intended field. Like the Illinois example actually kind of holds your hand into this kind of thinking by asking you about an experience, right? So instead of saying, like, I want to study biology because it's biology and I'm interested in biology, that's all too big, right? But instead, start with something small. So, like, last summer, I conducted ecological research on microorganisms in like saltwater marshes in Maryland, right? That is my experience. And it raised questions about the ways that microorganisms or environmental DNA can be used to evaluate the health and biodiversity of an ecosystem, right? All of that, way more specific. It's particular, it's narrow. It starts with an experience or an idea or a problem or a method of study that helps differentiate you and your interest in biology immediately, right? And if what you're interested in is like microorganisms or environmental DNA and applications of genetic study in ecological, like kind of health kind of questions, that is narrow, that is specific, and that is an area of academic interest that is within your major, but not all of your major. So start with that narrower interest. So for myself, I might look at, I'm writing my dissertation on mixed language poetry in the medieval period because, somebody does it, right? But I might think of that as like, again, I'm interested in Latin, English, multilingual poetry in this particular period of historical upheaval in England and kind of linguistic diversity, right? So that belongs in an English department at Yale, but it might also fit in a linguistics department or a medieval studies department in other places, right? But narrow your field. That mixed language poetry in the medieval period is much narrower. So start with your academic interest, not your major. Your major is determined by your interest. If you want to study microorganisms and eDNA, then you do biology, right? Maybe environmental science, but probably biology. But your interest is in the microorganisms. So your major is determined by your interest, not your interest by your major. So start with something narrow. Connect your past experiences, like this fictional microorganism study in the salt marshes of Maryland that I made up, right? So connect that past experience or activities with your interest. How did you get there? Right? What classes did you take? What studies did you do? What activities led you there? How did your intellectual interest develop out of, or how was it inspired by the activities that you do and the kind of specific classes or reading that the classes that you take or reading that you do? And then only at the end of the essay, so you've explained your academic interest and what questions are most exciting for you. You've connected those and shown how those have come out of activities and experiences and previous intellectual engagement. Then you can say, in order to study this, I want to major in biology at the University of Maryland, right? And so you can then identify which program or which interest would help explore or would best help you explore your interest more thoroughly. So it starts specific and then ends with your kind of why this major. Okay. All right. You also have examples of why school essays, and this is a kind of close, maybe sibling, cousin, something like that, to the why major. These are fundamentally about like, why do you want to go to this school? Right? You could apply to any school in the world or in the country at least. Why this school? So Georgia Tech is a very standard one. Why do you want to study your chosen major specifically at Georgia Tech? So you do have that like little bit of what is your major, why you want to study it, but how are you going to study it at Georgia Tech? Tufts gives you a much shorter one. Please complete the following statement. I'm applying to Tufts because, right? And they give you 50 or 100 words to explain why you're applying to Tufts.
You give me 1 second, I will fix the screen. I had a weird message pop up and it
Undid everything.
yeah. So we're
That's
just
okay.
gonna it's
Life's
a
light
live show.
sometimes.
This is how you know that it's all real. We are not okay, 1 second. Um
Just so y'all know, just to kind of let you know, I am notorious at going over time. I apologize for that in advance, but I will also stay to answer questions. So if you do have questions, please make sure you put them in the Q&A and I will do my best to get to everybody's kind of toward the end. Tech glitches aside.
okay, and we will just
Oh dear. Okay, we're going through.
okay. Yep. Just to recap, if you oh, we're right there.
Yeah, we're there.
Perfect.
All right, let me make sure. Oh, we're all doing stuff. Okay. So all right, so you have the Georgia Tech again, Tufts. Why Tufts? University of Chicago is a little bit more circumspect about it, but they actually expect a lot more kind of clarity, and they don't even give you a word count. They just give you a rough guideline. So how does the University of Chicago, as you know it now, satisfy your desire for a particular kind of learning, community, and future? Right? So how is it the right school for your academics, the right place and community of people for you to be involved in, and to help you with your goals, whatever those may be? Please address with some specificity your own wishes. That is, what do you want to do? What do you want? And how they relate to the University of Chicago, right? Why is Chicago the place? All right. You will also see um, some examples of what this is technically listed as a Y school, but you'll also start to see these Y school, Y major, Y school kind of hybrids essays where you have to kind of cover both in the same essay, but they are equally important parts. So, University of Wisconsin, tell us why you decided to apply to the University of Wisconsin, why this school, but also in addition, please include why you're interested in studying the major or majors you have selected. If you selected undecided, which you should never do, don't do it. Please describe your areas of possible academic interest. And again, they give you 650 words, so lots of space to really provide those details and that concrete. And just because they give you a lot of space doesn't mean you can write a really fluffy essay. It still needs to be dense, full of information about both you, your interests, and how it fits this school in particular. You also have some that are more clearly hybrids. So USC's describe how you plan to pursue your academic interests and why you want to explore them at USC specifically. Again, they tell you you can address first and second choice, but they only give you 250 words. And then Brown has, it's not quite the same, but it's a very similar one, and it's the fill-in at Brown for what would be your Y major. Brown's open curriculum allows students to explore broadly while diving deeply into their academic pursuits. So tell us about any academic interests that excite you and how you will pursue them at Brown. Again, both of these in that kind of 250 word range, which is very standard. So when you're thinking about your why school essay, the single most important thing is for you to do your research on the school, explore the detailed requirements, the courses, the faculty, the resources that are available to undergraduates, all of the little institutes, the libraries, the kind of interesting resources that a specific school has that make it different and special from others that might be similar. You really do want these unique qualities about a school and its curriculum to feature in your essays. You also have a chance to emphasize what is called your demonstrated interest. Some schools track this more closely than others, but fundamentally it's about how have you shown the school through virtual visits, through in-person visits, through emails, through contacting school alumni or current students. Like, how have you shown your interest in the school prior to shooting them your application, right? If, how have you engaged with the school and your interest in it? And what information has that provided you about the school that has made you excited to attend? You also, and this is harder to do because it's a little less like information gathering, but they also want to see that you understand the mission and educational philosophy of the school or program and how well it suits you. So a good example of this is, Brown's open curriculum is a very different kind of educational philosophy, right? Where you don't have core requirements. There are no core requirements at Brown. You have major requirements to fulfill your degree, but you have the opportunity to build your own education out of whatever classes you want to take, right? That is a different attitude to the idea of what an undergraduate education should be. They give you much more independence, much more ability to shape your own curriculum. And that's very different from a school that has a much more rigid kind of distribution requirement, something like UChicago's kind of Common Core curriculum, as well as a school that kind of features maybe it's more pre-professional resources like Penn. So schools that prefer job experience and internships and kind of career development, those types of things. That is a very different kind of attitude toward what an undergraduate education is. And different students are going to fit those different philosophies better in some cases than others, right? So you want to understand, like, what does this school think the job of a university is and what the experience of college should be like? Is that what I want? And how will I take advantage of that? And how, like, if it fits me, right? So understand the mission and kind of educational philosophy of the school. Be super specific. You can use the same structure for the essay from one Y school to the next, but all of the details should be different. You cannot use the same essay for multiple schools, or all of the essays are really bad. They're not specific enough. The more selective a school is in terms of like the lower its overall acceptance rate, the more eager it is to see how a student is the right match for the school, right? So if you're a pre-professional kind of oriented student and like really you're a good match for like a Penn and you apply to Brown, Brown's going to look at it and go, wow, this is a really great student. They shouldn't be at Brown, they should be at Penn, right? So you need to make sure that you are matching the schools that you are applying to and that the details and the argument you're making and showing how you're going to use those resources and why they matter to you. Those are things that you need to do very clearly. You also need to show your enthusiasm. And this is true. This is easy for your reach schools and the schools that are your dream schools and that you just can't wait to get into. But it is also true of your safety schools. So even if a school doesn't feel like it's you're most excited about it, even if you're like not as interested as your top school, you have to find the things in it that you are most excited about. Show that interest. Otherwise, they have minimal incentive to admit you, even if you're a great student for their school. So show your enthusiasm. All right. Now we're going to talk about other types of sample supplements and how to answer them. There are a range of types of essays, and we're going to kind of talk about a few of them and kind of how they fit in. All right. So my first bit of advice, and this is what I do in about a little over a week, the Common App is going to reset, and you're going to be able to see for most schools what the new supplements are this year. As you're assembling your school list, one of the things you should do early is compare prompts. So once you've settled on your school list, compare the possible prompts for each school, collect them up, and cross-list similar supplements. Don't write more than you need to. You are going to be writing a lot of essays. You can't avoid it. You're going to be writing a lot of essays. Don't create more work for yourself than you need to. So when schools give you choice, make sure about like which essays you write. Make sure you're picking essays that are the most advantageous and kind of cutting down your workload, right? You also want to make sure that as you're selecting your topics and choosing how you're going to approach different prompts, that you choose topics that can kind of work for multiple versions of similar prompts. So compare your prompts, kind of tally them up, see how they line up, and make sure that you're doing yourself favors so that you have more time to polish fewer essays than having to just churn out dozens and dozens and dozens of essays for a bunch of different schools. All right. So some of the classic supplemental essays, probably the most classic is expanding on an activity. So some examples of this, Stanford gives you like 50 words. It's like more of a short answer. Please briefly elaborate on one of your extracurricular activities, a job you hold, or responsibilities you have for your family. Vanderbilt gives you a much longer one, but it's fundamentally a kind of similar style question. Vanderbilt offers a community where students find a balance between their academic and social experiences. Please briefly elaborate on how one of your extracurricular activities has influenced you. And you can kind of see here, like your strategy, while it might be the same answer, is going to be a little bit different in how you prioritize the information in a 50-word answer versus a 400-word answer. If you have some of those longer, this is going to be true for some of the other examples we're going to look at too. But when you are looking at kind of longer essays, 300, 400, or more words, very often you're using some of the same techniques that you would be using on the more personal writing in your personal statement. Tell a story, give examples, create scenes, right, that help kind of enliven what you're talking about. Be very clear about the action you're taking and how these things are playing out. All right. Here's another example. This one's 250. Again, please provide more details on your most meaningful commitment outside the classroom while in high school and explain why it was meaningful. This explain why it was meaningful is kind of a through thread, right? So if what you're saying is like, I started a medical science magazine for high schoolers. Like this activity, right? Was crucial to like what I did as a founder, as an editor, as a leader, and it was meaningful to me for these reasons, right? So, what is it that you did? Show us kind of step by step how you kind of uh, what actions you took and your motivation. Why did you take them? Like, what was a problem that you thought needed to be solved? And then at the end, why was this meaningful? And then almost always, how has this experience something that you will bring with you into college? Even if you don't bring the activity specifically itself, like how are you going to continue to pursue something similar or something that is motivated by similar values in college? Like, how does it, why does this matter moving forward? All right. Um, Another very common and probably even more important type of essay is what we might term the community impact essay. Um, there are several schools that require this essay. MIT is one of them. We're about to talk about that. But even for the schools that don't, if you are given an opportunity and a choice to kind of talk about this, I usually recommend students take it unless they really haven't made an impact at all. Um, so this is an opportunity, colleges are interested in students who are going to make a positive difference in the world around them, right? That are going to matter to other people. Most colleges are interested in building an influential, like a positively influential alumni base. And they're thinking ahead. Who do we want who's going to do great things and have our name attached to them forever, right? Um, so as you think about like how have you, as a high school student, how have you improved the world for people around you? Making that argument and showing how you have done that and providing that evidence is a really powerful argument for how you're going to be a positive influence, both at the university when you get there and in your career afterwards. So, MIT, which is a required essay for them, MIT brings people with diverse backgrounds together to collaborate, from tackling the world's biggest challenges to lending a helping hand. Describe one way you have collaborated with others to learn from them, with them, or contribute to your community together. This prompt is doing a lot. It's almost doing too much. But basically, it's like, how do you work with people to do good things for other people? So, like, how have you worked on a team? So, like, not just by yourself, but like, how have you worked on a team to learn from each other, to learn with each other, and to contribute to the community together? Again, how have you mattered to your community? Um, Virginia Tech's is a little bit more straightforward, but they give you even fewer words. Virginia Tech's motto is Ut Prosim, which means that I may serve. Share how you contribute to a community that is important to you. How long have you been involved and what have you learned and how would you like to share that with others at Virginia Tech? Again, like what have you done to make the world better? Why does it matter? And how are you going to keep kind of bringing that with you when you come to college? All right, leadership and collaboration. I have put these together. You can kind of see this, a little bit of an echo of this in the MIT prompts. These are, I was going to say two sides of the same coin, but I actually think they're basically the same side of the same coin, right? In my opinion, based on the perspective that colleges take toward leadership and the way colleges think about collaboration, they are thinking of these as the same. A leadership essay is a collaboration essay, and a collaboration essay is a leadership essay. So there are ways of being a leader that are not the way that colleges are thinking about them, right? So being a good project manager, right? Or a good supervisor, those are leadership qualities. But colleges are not admitting supervisors. They are admitting team members. They are thinking about like how you would work on an academic team, right? So when you think about like the types of leadership you have done and the types of leadership experiences, it is almost all how have you worked with others and stepped up as a leader in a way that makes other people better and contributes to the overall success of a team effort. And if you're talking about collaboration, if the word they use is collaboration, they are talking about how do you work with other people, but they are interested in the way that you specifically, have stepped up to contribute something unique or interesting to a team effort. So in both cases, they're asking, how have you worked with other people? And how have you contributed something special or different or a little bit extra that has contributed to the success of the group project, right? They're the same, fundamentally, they're the same thing. So when you're looking at like comparing your prompts, if you're saying, well, this school asks about collaboration and this school asks about leadership, that is the same essay. So make sure that you're like thinking about those in those ways. You're not a boss, you're a team member. All right, so here's a good one from Dartmouth. Um, this is actually one of their optional ones. So again, you get a choice here, but you don't get a choice everywhere. So again, with Dartmouth, labor leader and civil rights activist Dolores Huerta recommended a life of purpose. We must use our lives to make the world a better place to live, not just to acquire things, she said. This is what we are put on earth for. In what ways do you hope to make, or are you making an impact? Why or how? And you can see how much that overlaps with community impact. Again, fundamentally, these are often the same essay where they start out with like, what is a problem that you see in your community or in the world that you live in? Then at the leadership part, how have you stepped up to lead others or to work with others in a leaderly way to address that problem that you have observed? What did you do? Bam, bam, bam. I did this, I did this, I did this, right? To answer these questions. And then what was the outcome? It was a positive impact on the community in these ways. And here is the evidence. And what I learned about this experience and my leadership is what, right? So again, very often, similar structures to the essay with different emphasis on your conclusion and your takeaways, depending on whether you're commenting on community impact or whether you're commenting on leadership and collaboration. All right. One of the essays that is, again, very ubiquitous, but also uses a lot of very different terminology, and which I expect will still have massaged terminology in this new round of application supplements. It is what we call the identity essay. These fundamentally are the same question, but they're asking it in slightly different ways. So an example here is from the University of Washington. And this has been kind of pretty standard for several years, but I don't expect it to change much this year, but I suppose it could. Our families and communities often define us and our individual worlds, right? So define us, who we are, that's identity. Community, which is another word that's common in a lot of these identity essays. Community might refer to your cultural group, your extended family, religious group, neighborhood or school, sports team or club, coworkers, etc. All of those identity categories. Describe the world you come from. Another phrase that's common in these identity essays, world you come from, and how you, as a product of it, might add to the diversity of the University of Washington. So basically, what these identity essays are like, who are you in the sense of like, how has your context, the specific like communities you come from, the place you come from, the other groups you belong to and that have defined you, like who are you? And how has that given you a perspective and an understanding of the world that brings something unique and interesting and exciting to the diversity of perspectives at the University of Washington, right? So the classic example I always give is that like I was raised in the kind of Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, right? I was applying to some schools as an undergraduate, including like Columbia and Yale and stuff like that, where that was not typical, right? Yale was not getting they were getting applications from prep schools in Massachusetts. They were not getting applications from weird rural mountain high schoolers in North Carolina, right? So my perspective as someone who kind of grew up in Appalachia right, would bring something to the diversity, that would have a different attitude, a different background, a different experience of the world I come from than many of the students at Yale. And that would contribute to their diversity. Um, some other kind of terms, um, North Carolina, which is the school I chose, um, discuss one of your personal qualities and share a story, anecdote, or memory of how it helped you make a positive impact. So again, you still have this community impact, but it's still about who you are, right? Your story, your anecdote, your personal qualities. And this could be a current community or another community you've engaged. So basically, how has the world you come from given you tools that you have brought to make your community better, to bring something to your community that was different and positive? Penn gives it a kind of slightly different angle. How will you explore the community at Penn? Well, that's kind of a why Pennish essay, but kind of why Penn community. But in particular, consider how Penn will shape your perspective and how your experiences and perspective, that's the identity part, will shape Penn. How is who you are and the experiences and perspective of your context going to shape the world at Penn? What are you going to bring? All right. Then you have some dealer's choice style essays. Um, so these are essays where you basically get your choice. Consider your application as a whole. Like, what do you personally want to emphasize about the application for admissions committee consideration? Highlight something that's important to you or something you haven't had a chance to share. Tell us, don't show us. So like literally don't give them a website. And you get 300 words. Another example of this might be like one of the last of the personal insight questions for the University of California application is basically, what do you think about you makes you a good candidate for the UC schools? That's kind of like a, what do we need to know? What do you want to tell us? Right? My advice for these, you do not write an essay for these questions. You always use an essay that you have written for a more specific prompt, but that you think is really good and really polished and adds something extra and new that isn't already addressed in the other writing in your application. So use the polished essays that you've written elsewhere, make what is usually minimal changes, and use them here. Do not write new essays for essays where you basically can choose to write about whatever. Enough schools will make requirements on you. Uh, don't add to your workload. All right. Then you have the short responses. I've mentioned these a couple times already. These are the like, you have 35 words or 200 characters or, an unspecified number of characters, but it's probably about 100 kind of to fill in this answer. I actually have a lot of respect for these. I actually think you learn a lot about a student's personality in a very short amount of time and very little effort on the kind of perspective of the admissions committee. So I think they are very efficient questions for learning about the like flair and perspective of a student. But these are the types of questions that can seem weird and unnecessary and like, why do they care? In these cases, though, you really do want to kind of lean into your perspective and what makes you different. And so I think that USC has perfected these questions, although some other schools like Princeton are trying hard, but they haven't quite got it down yet. So USC asks questions like, what's your dream job? If your life had a theme song, what would it be? Like, which well-known person or fictional character would be your ideal roommate? Right? So these kind of show your priorities, like who you picking, right? What songs are you listening to? And this is not a place where you want to like impress. Like you don't want to sound like this isn't where you like try to sound like you're talking to an adult and trying to impress someone you think wants highfalutin things out of you. You want to sound like you. The best answer I've ever had for dream job was BoJack Horseman animator, right? It's so specific. It's not just like I want to be an art animator. It's no. This show that has this particular animation style, that's what I'm into right now. That's my dream job, right? If your life had a theme song, what would it be? Like, okay, so maybe it's Beethoven, possibly, but chances are it's Dua Lipa, right? That's a better answer. sounds more real, sounds more authentic, makes you sound like a real person. Um, well-known person or fictional character, like who's it going to be and what are their qualities that you're seeing in them that you would like? I actually had one student, I argued with one student just for like half an hour one time. He said, my dream roommate is Sherlock Holmes. And I'm like, no, it's not. You would never be able to live with that man, right? Like, what is it? What is it that you're seeing in Sherlock Holmes that makes you want to live with them as a roommate? Um, they also can take other forms. So Columbia's had this, it used to be a lot of different lists, but I think they've got it down to one now. And they ask you to list a selection of texts and resources and outlets that have contributed to your intellectual development outside of classes. This is like books, journals, websites, podcasts, essays, plays, presentations, videos, museums, and other content, right? Again, it should feel real, but show them what you're into, right? If you're spending, you know, probably too much of your time watching, kind of in my case, YouTube videos on natural history, right? Tell them that, right? If you're like watching or reading uh, sci-fi webtoons, right? Tell them that these are contributing to your intellectual development. This is a chance for you to share your tastes and your personality and like make them want to come up and ask you more. Um, so some general tips for this, keep a running list. People, because they're short, people tend to dismiss them quite quickly, but you want to give yourself time to really think about your answers and run through several possibilities. That often means discarding your first 5 to 10 ideas, which are often too obvious, too common, or too cliche, right? If you're asked, what is your dream trip? And you tell me Japan, yeah, you and everybody else, right? So find something else or find something more specific, right? Um, Scrutinize the implications of your answers, right? What does each answer contribute to your reader's understanding of your interests, right? You need to make sure that you kind of you are thinking about, again, like if your answer is Sherlock Holmes and you think that's genuinely the best roommate ever, like why, right? Um, you also kind of need to avoid obscure answers, or you need to provide enough information in that answer so that they understand why it matters. So one of the questions is often like, what's the best movie of all time? My favorite is the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is this 1919 black and white silent German expressionist horror film, right? Early movies, right? Now, if I just wrote the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, no one is going to know what I'm talking about. You have to be able to either provide enough information that they are able to draw meaning from it, or it means nothing, or pick something that's not quite so obscure, right? Maybe you think Back to the Future is the best movie ever, right? They're more likely to know that. So avoid answers that are too obscure unless you're able to provide the information to show its relevance. Always keep the goals of your overall application in mind. How does your answer contribute to your persona and the kind of portrait of yourself that you're presenting to colleges, your interests, and your activities, right? Like, how do these all work together? All right, and then you have the even weirder ones. So some examples of these, like Occidental College, liberal arts college in like LA, right? What is the first song you would play for your Oxy roommate on move-in day? Right? Again, like embrace it. Harvard's totally ripping off Stanford here. The top 3 things your roommates might like to know about you. 200 words. Stanford's original that Harvard's totally ripping off. Virtually all of Stanford's undergraduates live on campus, so write a note to your future roommate that reveals something about you or that will help your roommate and us get to know you better. That last sentence is, or that last phrase is the point of these essays in 95% of cases. How can you say something about yourself under this pretense of writing to your roommate that is going to help the admissions office understand you better, get to know you, right? Like who are you? What do you like? What's your personality? Those like what are you into? Right? Like who are you in that sense? And so these essays are the best opportunities to really show that voice, to kind of connect on a more kind of interest in like how you see the world in a very kind of casual way to people who are more like your peers, even if in the back of your mind you should always know you're writing to an admissions officer. But this is about like, show us, right? One of my students several years ago who was admitted to Stanford wrote in this essay. He talked about his like sharing his impression, his Cardi B impression, right? Which was just a throwaway line, but it does actually show a lot about him. He is the kind of kid who's like got a Cardi B impression, and it is quite good. But in his little acceptance note from his reader, like that was one of the things that they mentioned, right? So this is the place where they actually get to connect with you. You think like, oh, that's a cool kid. I want to meet that kid, right? So she asked about like, I can't wait to see your Cardi B impression, right? These essays are those opportunities. Show your personality. Show the things about you that have flair and uniqueness and that other people think are cool and want to get to know, right? When you have these kind of weird essays, you need to kind of embrace that aspect of them. If they're too tailored and cultivated and they sound too crafted in that way, they're not really connecting. So you need to make sure that you're kind of embracing that kind of weirdness and the trueness of you and make it really feel authentic. And then you have the godfather of all weird college essays, the uncommon essay out of Chicago. And this is just one example from a couple years ago. Uh, but they have 5 new ones every year. Where have all the flowers gone? Quote from Pete Seeger's song. So the prompt is pick a question from a song title or a lyric and give it your best answer, right? When you have these, especially for the University of Chicago, which is its own kind of special animal in this whole discussion, what they're looking at is to see how you apply intellectual and academic frameworks and ways of questioning things to questions that are on their face absurd, right? So, like another of their questions, like, well, what if the room really was made out of cheese? And you have to ask yourself, well, like, what would that mean? And you can answer that as maybe a poet. How would a poet answer that question? How would it matter to poetry and to lyricism if the moon were made out of cheese? And an astrophysicist or an astronomer might answer that question very differently. What would it be if the moon were made out of cheese? Right? What would the implications to the universe be if that were the case? They don't care about the specific answer. What they want to see is how your brain works, right? Show them how your brain works. So you take this absurd question and you treat it seriously and see where the implications take you. So when you're approaching Chicago or you're approaching one of these weirder questions like that, really embrace the premise and then treat it as an opportunity for you to show them how your brain like makes meaning out of like something that's absurd, right? Okay. I'm going to turn it back over to Dorothy to talk a little more about admissions, but I will hang around. I did pretty well, right on the hour mark. So I will hang around to answer your questions about supplements at the end, but I'll turn it over to her for now.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Definitely get some water. Um, that was a lot of information in there, everyone. So, as a reminder, we will send out this recording tomorrow. It'll be emailed. It'll also be on our website, ingeniusprep.com/webinars. Um, or you can email me if you by chance don't get it. But before we dive into questions, and now is the perfect time to put any last minute questions in the Q&A. A breakdown of our admissions results. I won't read them all to you. I'll just leisurely scroll through them. And our programs and services. So if you are, you know, if this is the summer where you are working on your applications, now is the perfect time to get that extra help. So if you have any questions about um, your specific case or how we can help you, you can click that link and you can schedule directly. Or You can hit yes on this poll that I am going to launch. Your consultation will be about a 30-minute call where we will learn all about you, your student, where they want to go to school, what they want to study. Of course, answer any questions you have about us, but come together and create the best plan we can on how we can get your student into that dream school. So there was a lot that we covered, and there's a lot of little nuanced things in the working of creating the perfect application for you. And that is where we come in. We have done it for hundreds of thousands of kids, so um, we can definitely help your child as well. But with that being said, we will dive into some questions. Okay. So first up, I have a question about writing the supplemental essay and Common App essay. Is it a good idea to start with a statistic to hook the reader or include it at all in any part of my writing piece?
Um, I mean, statistics can be helpful in some cases. I would not use them as a hook. I think they're less of a good hook than you might think they are, although it always depends on the circumstances. So if, for example, you're talking about a why major, right? Question. You're like, why do you want to study this thing? I had a student one time, forget, I forget the specific statistic, but she was an environmental science major, right? And basically she was saying like, I want to contribute to lowering the overall kind of carbon emissions of this particular field. She started with the kind of claim that, by the year 20, I think it was like 2040, if we hadn't reached carbon negative emissions, that it would like we would be projected to be unable to halt or stop climate change. Like that's the kind of thing where you're like, okay, I see that. You start with this startling statistic, then you say like, this is the problem that I want to tackle, and this is what I've done to tackle it. So there are ways to do that. The last place I would probably put that is your personal statement. That doesn't sound like the right type of information and the right type of beginning for an essay that is fundamentally about a personal question. I think that is probably better suited to supplemental questions that are about your academic interest or something related to that. So it's not a hard no, but I would use it sparingly, and you want to use it very deliberately and make sure that you're picking something that really works well. The same thing goes for quotes. Don't start your essays with other people's words. Also, don't finish your essay with other people's words. So no famous quotations unless you are specifically required to respond to one. Those tend to not be good strategies. You want it to be about you, not about Martin Luther King Jr.
What's the difference between the instructions and the prompt?
So the only thing I showed you for the personal statement today were the instructions. Everything I showed you was the instructions. The prompts themselves, there are 7 of them. They're like, what is something um, that you lose track of time doing, and why is that important to you? Or kind of what is a challenge you have overcome, right? Those very specific questions, those prompt style questions, um, they can help you brainstorm, but often they end up kind of limiting the way you're thinking about the essay. And ultimately, like I never deal with the prompts with my students. So when I'm working one-on-one with a student, I never deal with the prompts. And even at the end, when they finished their essay, 80% of the time it falls into one of the first 6 prompts, right? It is one of the prompts. They just didn't think about it that way. And then if it's not, there's always the last one, which is just like write us an essay. And you can just say, I wrote you an essay, right? You will have to select which prompt you're answering in the Common App, but based on my discussions with former admissions officers, like most of them don't even look at it. Like they don't even read it. They just start reading the essay. So just write the essay you need to write that tells them what they need to know about you. But again, the instructions just let you know the objectives. Distinguish yourself in your own voice, right? Tell us an essay about what they need to know about you outside of your achievements, grades, and test scores. That's the job of the personal statement.
If my extracurriculars are centered around music and engineering, how can I convey aspects of both within my supplementals?
Um, well, first of all, don't discount your activities list, right? So your activities list, I think students underestimate just how much the activities list is scrutinized in admissions offices. They pay very close attention to it. So if your activities list is just filled with music and engineering, they will see that. Um, I would though recommend like we would the terminology that Ingenious uses is that your engineering and music would be kind of central ideas to your application persona. Those are kind of like the key parts of yourself that you're trying to communicate to the admissions readers. My guess is that one of those is likely to be a significant feature in your personal statement. So you're probably talking about some of them already, but one or more of those is also probably kind of related to your academic study, whether you want to go into music or whether you want to go into engineering. So you will want to distribute prompts for supplements, kind of distribute them out. This is something that you always want to kind of plan um, for each school, especially schools with multiple supplements available to you. Make sure that you're not providing like three essays on music and none on engineering, right? Or, or all of your essays on engineering and none on music. So spread those out. Think about those. Again, this strategize which essays you're going to use or what topics you're going to use for which prompts and fill that out. However, if you're applying to a school that either doesn't have many supplements or only has like one significant supplement, don't stress about it too much. There are plenty of places in your application where multiple interests are highly visible. Your activities list, your kind of transcript, if you're looking at, you have lots of engineering and music classes, your recommendations when your teachers write about you, you probably have a STEM and you probably have an arts recommendation. So like those are all places that all of those details are going to be involved in. So if you're don't, if you feel like, but I haven't written a music essay for this school, it's probably okay as long as you have a variety and you have taken advantage of the variety they have offered you. So it probably will happen anyway, but you should be proactive about strategically planning for the schools that have lots of essays.
What are your best tips for revising essays? What should we look for slash avoid?
Um, okay. So the first thing I would say is other readers are your friends if you are critical about the advice they're giving you and they are specific about the advice they are giving you. So one of the things that is true is that admissions readers bang through these essays. They read them fast, 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 fast. So as you're reading, or as you're writing them, and especially as you're revising them, you want to make it sure that they're clearly organized, that the relationships and takeaways between the different parts of the essays are clear, and that you give what I call signal words to let them know. So like, you know, um, whether even if it's something is like, however, or I used to think this, but now I think this. You're kind of clearly outlining for them what is the takeaway, what is the change. This is also where other readers can be helpful because they're coming at it fresh. When you're revising an essay, you've been working on it for a while and you know what you mean to be saying. So you just fill in the blanks, even if they're not there, right? Have somebody read through it and see if they know, ask them, like, what do you think? What's the main takeaway you got from this? Like, what did you learn about me? Like, what details, like, were there any parts of it you found confusing? Right. The understanding kind of where that disjuncture is happening is crucial in your revision. The other thing is ask yourself, what is this essay about? Right. So, like, you're like, I've written an essay about music. Okay. But, like, what is your point? What are you saying about music? And if you can't answer that question, you need to go back to your essay and figure out what is this essay saying about music? Like, what is my relationship with music? So that you're really pushing yourself to be specific about your takeaways because you will want somewhere in your essay, when you're talking about supplements, this is a specific supplement piece of advice for revision. At the end, so you've been doing your revisions and you're kind of like, am I done? When you get to the end, go back to the prompt and read the prompt. And then take a little highlighter or go into your Word or whatever it is you're using. And in 1 to 2 sentences, highlight the answer to the prompt. And if you can't do that, you need to revisit how your essay is answering that specific question. That is not true for the personal statement, but it is true for your supplements, right? If the question is, how have you made a positive impact on your community? Highlight that sentence, which is usually in your introduction or more likely in your conclusion. Like highlight it, point it, hold yourself accountable to answering the question. Um, the other thing is replace general stuff with details, right? So if you're like, I read a bunch of books, no, 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 no. Which books did you read? Right? Or I started, as editor, I made sure everyone at the discussion table was contributing. Well, like, how did you do that? Right? How did you get everybody talking? Right? So replace general statements with specifics that are concrete and something they can visualize. I'm a very visual person, and I really like in student essays if I am able to kind of come away with a clear, like literal image of the student doing something, that can be very helpful. So, like, ask yourself, what have I shown them? If you were to take a picture of some moment in this essay that really embodies it, what is it? And then if you challenge yourself to really like specify those things, you kind of have a better kind of compass for where your essay needs to go. But always answer the question. Make sure you answer the question. Okay.
We have a few questions about if it is okay to talk about like if a student has ADHD or some other type of neurological difference, or if they should um, if it is advisable to write about their faith in their essays or talking about politics, and could that
Okay.
hurt their application chances?
Okay. So I'll take these one at a time because I think the answer is similar, but actually kind of different for each one. So the first one, when you're thinking about neurological difference or potentially mental health struggles or other types of things like that, legally they cannot, right? So they are not allowed to discriminate against students for those things. However, and for the most part, I think that is true. Most admissions readers have a very generous attitude and spirit and are less likely to be judgmental about that. However, you do not want to give them reasons to or concerns that you would not be able to succeed at their school if they admitted you. Um, One of the things admissions officers, as well as any school administrator, is worried about is like whether a student would be okay at a place and be able to succeed at a place. So there are definitely, especially with more of the mental health struggles, I am more reticent to include those as part of it unless you need to. I've actually worked with students who had to take like a semester off and had to account for that disruption in their schooling, right? So there are ways to do that, and you'll have to be very strategic about that. However, when you're talking about neurological difference, I think it depends a lot on what you're going to say with it and whether you feel like it's essential to understanding your persona or your perspective. Um, so, um, my general advice would be it's usually better to not talk about it, mostly because you usually have something more advantageous and better to talk about, right? That if you're talking about these things, you're not talking about something else, which would probably be better. However, if you think that your experience with this difference has really given you a perspective that is valuable and contributes to the way what you will bring to college, I think that there is space for it. And I have certainly had students do that in the past. I am more likely to think about that with other types of neurological difference. I am less likely to think about that for ADHD specifically. I think that would be one I would probably avoid unless you have to address it, in which case I would address it very head on. So again, probably avoid, but it can be done. And it's really about how essential you think it is to understanding your perspective and how you have turned that into a positive thing. If it is not a positive thing, you want to do something else. Talk about something else that has a more positive outcome. When it comes to things like religion and politics, um, there are absolutely ways that you can talk about them. And uh, the advice I give to students when they're talking about, so whether you're talking about a religion or whether you're talking about politics, it's that the attitude that you need, okay, colleges are mostly 95+% of colleges, including like all the ones in the top 100, right? Um, Colleges are, they aim for inclusivity and they aim for a kind of generosity, intellectual and social generosity. So, whatever your particular faith or political viewpoint or details of the platform that you kind of are you would advocate for or your political involvement, whatever it is, you need to come at that with a spirit of inclusion and generosity. And if that is not the case, then you don't want to talk about that. And if you give the sense that your involvement in any way excludes people, is hostile toward people, um, uh, dismisses people, or things like that, that's when it starts to look like a kind of red flag for most colleges and universities. But how you identify in terms of your religion, how you identify in terms of your political identity, those are things that they will not discriminate against you for them unless you use language that makes them question whether you would be able to get along with people on campus. Um, if you have questions, this is actually a good place to like, again, kind of consult with others. Like, am I representing myself in a way that is inclusive and generous? Um, but yeah, I've had several students for whom their faith is very important to them, and that has been a kind of important piece of how they present themselves. But again, with a perspective and an attitude of generosity and inclusion.
On the assumption that schools do not exchange essays, why is it not recommended to use the same essay?
Oh, okay. No, 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 no. You should use the same essay except for Y school, right? So you should reuse the same, like if you have a leadership essay, you should use it for every leadership question, right? You'll have to adjust it because the contours of the question are a little bit different, or the length of the essay is a little bit different. You'll have to adapt it, but you should be reusing the same essays. The essay that you cannot reuse again and again is the Y school. If your Y Penn essay is basically the same essay as your Y Princeton essay, that is neither a good Penn essay nor a good Princeton essay because it is not specific to Penn and it is not specific to Princeton. So, absolutely, that's why you compare prompts. Reuse essays over and over and over again every time you can, right? Don't create more work for yourself. But for the Y school essay specifically, it must be so school specific that the details cannot map. If what you say is like, I want to come to Penn because it's got, really good academics and it's a really nice environment and like it's really inclusive and I like that part of the country, right? And then you flip over and you just literally replace Penn with Princeton, it ain't gonna work because it's not particular to either school. So reuse essays, except for Y school, can't reuse those. You can again reuse the structure. So like, this is what I want to study. I want to study with these faculty. I want to use these resources or have this similar idea here, but like packed full with school specific details, names of faculty, names of courses, institutes, programs that are particular to the school, library holdings, that are particular. Um, School student organizations and clubs and the way that those have gotten involved in communities. Specific things about these schools that differentiates them. Those have to be very different or they're unsuccessful for both schools or all schools.
Okay, so this question is about AI. So, will
Okay.
colleges be able to tell that a student has used it?
Um, I am not going to give you a 100% answer one way or the other, mostly because I personally don't know how accurate they are, but I do know that most schools have subscribed to AI detecting software, right? That this is a thing that is going around. And while they might not be able to detect it with 100% accuracy, you should expect that they can, and you shouldn't use it because that's like immediate disqualification. The other thing I will say, and I will die on this hill, right? You are a better writer about you than any AI is. I promise you. I know you might not feel confident as a writer, and you know that writing is not my specialty. Any essay you write about yourself is better than an AI writing about you and what you have done. I think AI can be very useful in the college application process. It can be very helpful in starting your research on schools. It can be very helpful in kind of thinking about your fit and kind of what specific programs you might be interested in a school. And it might even be helpful as you like start to think about topic generation and what types of things you might want to write about. But when it comes to the actual writing, not only would you be immediately disqualified if they detect AI writing in your application, I don't believe an AI written essay is likely to be successful anyway because they're awful. I've read them, I've seen them, they're terrible. So, both because you don't want to get caught and because you want to write a good essay, write your own essay. Um, if you need like a little bit of translation software or that kind of stuff to help you polish or grammar, kind of like Grammarly AI stuff, like that is a perfectly acceptable use of AI. And if you have questions about it, you can always consult specific schools' AI policy. Caltech has a really, I think, even if you have no intention of applying to Caltech, the Caltech admissions website has some clear guidelines about like how to ethically and unethically use AI for your applications. And I think that's good guidance for any school. But you write better than AI. I don't know you, but I promise you do. You know more about yourself than AI does. And that is way more important to colleges um, than than a technically polished but boring and predictable essay.
How much time should a student spend on supplemental essays on average?
Um, I'm going to assume that this is the first version of an essay. So, like sometimes you're reusing an essay, which you should totally reuse if they're the same prompt, and you should just adapt them. So, assuming that you're writing from fresh, you're usually looking at slightly less time than your personal statement, right? You are really polishing these up. So, personal statements, mostly because they're often the first writing that I start doing with students, they usually take 15 to 20 drafts to get to the final. Most supplements take around 10 to 15. If it's the first version of that essay. Once you kind of get on a roll and you kind of understand how to adapt and you kind of get better as you approach the RD round and you kind of understand how these things go, it speeds up a little bit. But you should expect many, many rounds of revision to really to start those. Again, supplements for Common App applications should come out basically August 1st, and you should start looking at them in early August. I will start looking at them with my students in early August and start writing them. At least give yourself 6 to 8 weeks for that first round looking at them.
How do I start my essay in a way that grabs attention but still feels natural? How do I end my essay in a strong and reflective way without repeating myself?
Okay, so there are lots of different ways to establish a hook. My I would say I will say this. With supplements, when you have few less space and you usually have a more specific prompt, um, you usually can kind of dive right into the meat of the answer. Just like start kind of getting at the question or telling the story you need to tell to just get there. So like don't dilly-dally with a hook that adds 50 words to your answer because that the payoff is not there. Um, but when it comes to other types of hooks, you need to establish the theme of your essay in the first couple of sentences. Like, what thematically is your essay about, right? Um, in some cases, this means like identifying the problem. In some cases, this is about like if you're talking about your relationship or your identity with a community, like what is a thing, like what is something in this community that you have done. Start with that image that really just kind of coalesces everything. Um, it's going to be different for every essay, though. Um, and I think that the way that I have often approached this with students, especially for supplements, is to not worry about the hook first. Worry about the hook when you've kind of got the meat of the essay done. And then you can say, what's the most engaging place in this essay that I have written to kind of start this essay and capture their attention? Because if you write a hook separately, you're wasting space. But if you go into a kind of organized but chronological essay and you're like, well, what's the moment in this essay that really jumps out? And then prioritizing that in your revision and kind of getting that to the front so that it like snaps the essay into focus like from the beginning. That's a much better and successful way of doing that. For your conclusion, um, very often the conclusion is the place you literally answer the question, right? So if you're talking about a supplement and it literally asks you like, how have you made your community a better place, or how have you, um, or how will you bring this with you to your kind of the community at Vanderbilt or whatever. The last few sentences of your conclusion usually needs to hit that on the head, answer the question. Um, and even if it doesn't, even if you feel like you're repeating yourself, it might be less that you need to change your conclusion and more that you need to like not forefront your answer in your essay and just start with your story. So when it comes to supplements, use your conclusions to like show to answer the question directly and to kind of look forward to how this story or this experience will matter to your college or career, your kind of life moving forward. Because again, colleges are interested in why this matters to who you're going to be and what you're going to bring. So how is it going to kind of bear with you into the future?
Okay. What if I wrote a lot about the most important extracurricular activities in the personal statement, but the supplement asks for the activity again? Should I choose another activity to write about?
Yes, absolutely. Especially if there are only two essays. So if your example is like Vanderbilt, that is the only essay at Vanderbilt. So you have the personal statement and you have this other activities essay. So they cannot be the same topic. Um, so it can potentially be something you mention in your PS, but it should not be something that is featured in your personal statement. You definitely need to choose something else. And even if the one you wrote about in your personal statement is the most important, then you should just move on to like, what is the next most important thing I have done, and think about how that has done it. That is an important part of the kind of essay topic distribution for each school. Make sure you're not kind of sending. You don't want to sound like a one-trick pony, right? Only doing the same thing over and over again. So make sure you're showing that range and that kind of interest.
So I do many activities ranging from harp, golf, research. How can I tie them together into a cohesive story for my application or individualized for essays?
Okay, so my guess. is that you probably aren't going to tie all of them together in one essay, but you can kind of show over the course of your application how they fill important parts of your life. I would say that a a very effective personal statement structure, and this is also true from some of the more personal supplements, so like the identity essay, sometimes the activities essay, or things like that, is to take an activity that is more like a hobby, like something that you love, but is a little bit separate from your like career goals or your academic interests, and show how that has given you a perspective on the other things you do. So, for example, if you're, I assume by harp you mean like literal music harp. Um, I hope so. I'm going to answer it as though that's the truth. So, if you're a harp player, like what is a perspective or an idea or an understanding about the world that playing harp has given you? And how have you brought that or applied that perspective to engineering? Like I just lectured some of our own students on one of the Johns Hopkins successful essays where a student does precisely that. Like she's a pilot and she shows like how a lesson she learned as she was learning to fly a plane she applied that to her career interest in journalism. So like how does understanding this idea of perspective and not thinking about your own left and right and your own sense of direction as a kind of obvious and universal one to journalism and making sure to represent not only other people's perspectives, but other people's perspectives, especially when they're most different from hers, right? So you can take like, how have you learned a lesson in one and brought it into the world of another? That is also true for some of the identity essays. So, for example, if you're a ballet dancer, right, you're like, I am a ballet dancer, right? And that is literally true when you're doing ballet. But like, how are you a ballet dancer when you're not doing ballet? Right? How is that more of an identity and a perspective and like something about you that extends beyond the stage or the training room, right? So think about kind of what it is about you that is drawn to each of these activities, and then that's where you'll start to see some of the like commonalities and the common threads. But you probably should not try to jam all of them into one essay. You definitely want to kind of give them their own space, show how they play a role in your life. And if you don't get to absolutely every one in an essay for absolutely every school, that's probably fine. Don't try to do too much in one essay.
Okay. Um, so our last question, I know there are a lot of questions that we have not had the chance to answer, so feel free to ask them on your consultation or you can email them to me and we will get you those answers. But let me scroll through, find a good last question. Okay. So we've seen this a few times, but in your experience, what makes an essay memorable?
Um, well, I kind of tipped my hand a little bit earlier with the like I'm a very visual person, and I really do like when you get to the end of an application. So not just an individual essay, but when you get to the end of an application, have you left the reader with like a couple of like snapshots that really jump out, right? So like I had a student a couple of years ago who wrote her personal statement on bug hunting, like with her family, but and kind of raising bugs that they kind of captured. And one of the scenes in her essay is that she will share like cockroach pictures with her friends, the way her friends share like cat and dog um, pictures. And it's just this kind of such a clear visual, quirky moment where you're just like, yeah, this is the girl with the cockroach pictures, right? It's this little tiny detail that take like 5 words in her PS, but it's this image that really just kind of jumps out. Now, The job of the essay is to answer the question and to show that maturity and growth and that it needs to do that. The primary job of the essays is to make sure that you provide the evidence that they are looking for and the content and information that they need about you to evaluate you as a candidate. So if they are looking for leaders, you need to show them that you're a leader and you need to provide the evidence that that is the case. If they are asking you about community impact, you need to show them that you have done that, right? That you have been engaged that way and that you care in that way. So the content in those cases is absolutely the most important thing. But when you get to the end of the application and they've kind of got a sense of who you are and how achieved you are and how strong a leader you are, what are those little details and like what have you told them about yourself that might be like someone you meet at a party, right? You're just like, I don't know, I met this person at the party who like collects bugs and shared cockroach pictures, right? Like that's memorable, right? I met this woman at the party and like she plays like early 80s electronica on the harp, right? Like this clear image of you. So like what are those little things that they're going to be like, I just met this person who does this, right? Like what are those little things? And you want to try to decide what those are for you. Like what are the things that your friends find most compelling about you and your family you might think is a little bit weird, but they love you for it. Like some of those little details and just sprinkle a few of them throughout your entire application. It's not just your essays, it's like the whole application so that they get to the end and not only do they think of you as someone who has done great things and will achieve great things and is very, very smart, but you're just kind of like someone they kind of like being someone they kind of like is really, really valuable. And that's the kind of thing that really kind of creates this connection between you and your reader that makes them like both remember you and kind of want to fight for you in the kind of admissions committee, right? So think about just those little things. Again, it's the like Cardi B impression, right? It's the cockroach pictures. It's those little like images of yourself, these little snapshots that you might take and just kind of sprinkle them through your application. And a lot of that comes from replacing general ideas, general descriptions with specifics. Always go for specifics. And sometimes you'll know exactly what the details are that are going to resonate with people, but different details resonate with different people. So just pack those details in, those little images, those little glimpses into your life. And if you lay enough seed, hopefully some of it will take root and you'll be able to like really, really succeed there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shannon, for answering all of our questions and for breaking down all of those prompts. I know it was very helpful. I know we all learned a lot, so thank you for your time.
Excellent. My pleasure, guys. Good luck
Awesome.
wherever you are in
Well,
this process.
yes, thank you all for joining us on our 4-week journey across the application. If you've missed any part of it, all of the recordings will be in the email tomorrow. They will be on the website, and if you miss any of them, email me and I will get them to you. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening.